Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are really privileged to have with us David Willows, who will be helping us to tell the story of our school in uncertain times, which is really the need for an hour, for this particular hour, I would say. Dr. Willows is Director of Advancement at the International School of Brussels, Belgium. He's also a regular presenter and trainer at international events and authors of several books and articles in the field of international school branding, innovation, admissions, marketing, and communications. He has taught students right from primary to post-graduation, been the editor of 2 international journals, worked communications project for the European Commission, acted as an advisor to the Bishop of London, published articles on a variety of subjects in the fields of philosophy, theology, storytelling, knowledge management, international education, and organizational theory. Welcome you, David. Please take over.
Thanks very much, and good evening to everybody, and it is a real privilege to be with you. I'm joining you from a very unusually sunny corner of Brussels in Belgium today, and it's the middle of our afternoon here, and yet, as far apart as we are, one of the things that I'm very conscious of is, particularly in these current times, we are, in a sense, we are united in a way that perhaps we've never been before, and kinds of opportunities for collaboration are certainly one of the real benefits of the situation that we find ourselves in today. So I'm going to start off by making a confession. That's not just because I used to be a priest in the Church of England, but I'm going to confess something right from the beginning. And the confession is this, that I'm actually not, despite the fact that I may have worked in some of these fields for a long time, I'm maybe not the expert that you were hoping for today. I am David Willows, and I have done all those jobs that were just listed, but one of the things I'm very conscious of is that these kinds of conversations are not necessarily moments to get all the answers, but maybe to provide a context of reflection, a moment where we pause and just think about what are some of the themes and issues that we are facing. And maybe some of the things that you're here today are just ideas that you will develop as you manage your own situation. I'm not going to pretend to tell you or to be an expert for you today, but I am going to share some experience. And one of my hopes today is that we will build this presentation in many ways together. We will have an opportunity to be a bit collaborative, and I'm going to try something that I hope will work, that will enable us to be quite interactive together. And we're going to kick this off straight away by finding out who is here. And this is where hopefully the fun starts. So if you do have a phone with you, and some of you clearly are seeing how to use this, and you've got your phone and you've put in menti.com, you put in the code, and then there's a question that will appear on your phone. You can answer that question, some of you are doing, and press submit. And as if by magic, you will be actually interacting with the slide. So we can see in real time exactly who is here. So I'm very curious because I don't know you all. So we have some teachers, some people who are working in school leadership, quite a few people working in admissions and marketing. So this is really just to get us going today. It's interesting for me to find out who is in the room. But one of the things I also notice about this subject of storytelling and telling the story of our schools is that it probably means different things to different ones of us. That for some of us, it's about how do we communicate to parents of children we teach about how they are learning. Maybe some of us, we have a responsibility for making sure that enrollment remains high. And so we're telling the story in a different way. But one of the things I know about storytelling is that it unites us in a very positive and powerful way. So there's something about, we're going to have more questions and interaction as we go along, but I can already see that many of you are teachers here today, and it's great that you've joined us. So let's go to another question, and again, you'll see this on your phones. The question is, why do we tell stories? And I'm very curious, if you just think for a minute, why is it that as a human species, we tell stories to one another? What is it that we're trying to do? So I'm going to give you a moment again to reflect on that. We see some ideas already coming up. So that's very interesting. The first response here, that stories give hope to mankind. They pass on information, sharing ideas. They help us imagine, share experiences in ways. Stories also telling us here is that they can actually engage us or make something interesting. Maybe we tell stories as a way of helping people learn, to remember. It's a way of sharing our emotion. We see loads of ideas coming out here about how and why we tell stories. I love this one of to help others understand us. It's a way of communicating who we are and also our journey. That idea of journey is really powerful when you think of storytelling. So essentially, one of the things that when we talk about telling the story, it's something that I've had to think about many times in my career. And the simplest way that I've come up with trying to describe why we tell stories is actually this idea of stories help us make sense of our lives. In other words, they're a deciphering mechanism. It's like a code that we write onto the chaos of our existence, and they help us create order out of that chaos. And people have done that in human history all the way through from the beginning of time. They have told stories in words and pictures that make sense of the chaos of life. And that might be quite a philosophical way to begin the session, but you'll see in a minute why I think that's so important when we come to understanding schools. Another point here is that stories don't just describe reality. It's not about giving information. If you're a storyteller, you know that you actually create reality by telling stories. You're creating meaning for people. And when it comes to schools, my experience of schools, both as a parent, as someone who's worked in a school for many years now, is that making sense of school can be tricky. It's actually hard to understand how schools work. And it's actually very, very hard to understand how learning works. And the best analogy I can think of here is that I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to buy a car. I have, and I've always felt that I was a very naive purchaser of cars. And the reason for that is because I don't really understand how cars work. So what happens is I walk into the showroom and I'm looking for a car, and I choose the car based on things like what color it is or whether it has a Bluetooth connection for my phone. And I don't really ask the important questions about cars because I don't really understand how they work. And it's my view that when it comes to schools, particularly when it comes to parents trying to choose a school for their children, they don't really understand how learning works. So they will choose a school very often naively or based on things that are somewhat random. I've known people to choose to come to my school because it was sunny that afternoon, or because they liked the red playground equipment. But it wasn't really focused on understanding learning. So when we tell the story of learning in our schools, we also have to understand how complicated that story is. And so some of the things we're going to look at today is to think, how do we make this simpler so that people around us can really make sense of learning, make sense of how schools work. And what traditionally we've done with schools, if you had jobs like mine, is that you would spend a lot of time writing complicated curriculum documents, as if that was what we do when we buy a washing machine. We don't go to the manual that looks often like this and read from cover to cover. We have a go, we press the buttons, we interact, we make mistakes, and then we find out how to use it. And yet at schools, what we've become very often, we create enormous brochures full of long, complicated words, and it doesn't really express what schools are all about. And then we create websites, and I know that none of your school websites really look like this, but this strikes me as a website that someone got carried away with writing in this website. And I think to some parents, when we talk about learning and the education of their children, it can feel a bit like this website, a bit overwhelming, a bit too much, and you don't know where to begin or end. And then what we do when we finally trim it down a bit, we fill our websites and our brochures and our communications with jargon. And so this is one that, you know, we used to hear a lot, and here we are well in the 21st century, and we continue to talk about learning in ways that I'm not sure that so many people understand. And just to prove the point, I'm going to ask you to go back to your phones just for a second. And the next question, if you see that coming up on your screen, maybe there are some cliches that you have used or you've heard that you think that are pretty well known, and that maybe you'd be prepared to admit to using, that maybe you know deep down they're not really as clear to other people as they are to you. And I'll give you an example just to get you going. I've always been a bit averse to that phrase, educating the whole child. And one of the reasons why I wonder about that is because I think that some people come from places far away and they hear us say that, and in fact, they're wondering to themselves, are there schools where you just educate the foot? Are there schools where you don't take in the whole? And we know what we're saying, but we can see already that you're coming up with some interesting cliches here, this idea of holistic education, conceptual understanding, creating leaders. We know what these terms mean, and yet when we fill our communication with these terms, it's not that they're wrong. All I'm suggesting today is that as you tell that story, it's maybe worth thinking about how much understanding is communicated and created. So obviously, I'm not alone in using cliches, and I'm very happy about that, that even over there in India, there's a few good ones still going. Learning skills to live their lives, promoting knowledge, transdisciplinary skills. These are ones that, again, we know that we use all the time. And all I'm questioning is this communicating in a simple way to help parents understand how learning works? And so as we take that, one of the things that I've spent the last 15 years thinking about is how do I, as someone who works in a school, take families on a journey? This is a way of modeling that journey, that they begin at stage one, at the moment of attraction, the first time they hear about our school. And my job is to lead them through these stages in a way that is coherent, where I can tell the story of my school and help people find their place in that story in each stage along the way. And I've got to think about how clear and simple that story is being told, what's important, how the language is being used, and how, and maybe where that story is maybe breaking up a little bit. And this has been a help for us to kind of understand how it is that people journey through the school. So that's what I did for 15 years since I joined ISB back in 2005. And then suddenly, as we all have, we've had this enormous disruption to our own story of 2020. So one of the things that I'm going to do today is work with you through a few ideas and a few thoughts as we think, okay, if that was business as usual, how is this particular situation really affecting our schools and the way in which we tell the story of our schools? And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is just to, again, have a reflection moment and to think, with COVID-19, how is COVID-19 changed the story of your school? How has it impacted what you're able to do or not do? And maybe let's just get a common sense. I'm sure that we can predict some of the answers that you'll be talking about. So obviously, as it's come up already, I mean, we've made a transition, many of us, to to online learning or distance learning, and that's something that many schools have had to work with. And we also know across the world that there are many schools where that hasn't worked. I spend a lot of time talking with schools in Africa where the network infrastructure isn't such you can actually facilitate learning in that way. We see other things, doing everything on virtual platforms, graduation on a virtual platform. Lots of comments about online learning. COVID-19 has challenged the story of my school, tested its efficacy and reliability. I think that's a great comment that, in fact, one of the things that we're facing right now is we've lived with a story where things haven't been challenged very much. And suddenly, the quality of our schools is out there for everybody to see. And were we prepared? Should we have been more prepared? Are questions people are asking. In my school, in my context, I know that a lot of questions are being asked about what's our value proposition. If we are going to remain for a period of time with distance learning, is it really worth the money that people are paying? New ways of working, exactly that. Not just new ways of student learning, but also having to learn as staff teams. How do we work together? Not able to develop social connection, but establish emotional connect. This sense that we all have of inability, maybe the most disruptive moment that we've had is that sense of connection from one another. And as strong as our distance learning programs may be, I do think that we've all felt that sense of deep loss of not being able to connect with one another in the way that we've been used to. So lots of challenges. This movement from face-to-face to online is really, really clear. And what's interesting about this is that, again, we would probably say that the story that we all share right now has become a lot more common across the world. That I could do this in almost any country in the world, and it would be the same set of issues. And that allows us the opportunity to share some of our best ideas. I wrote a blog not too long ago where I was encouraging people to actually share ideas and also copy from one another. And this, I believe, is a moment where we should be proudly copying from one another those learnings, those ideas, those things that are working in one school and seeing how we can implement them in another. So thank you for your comments. All of this, by the way, will be collated when you see a version of this PowerPoint, these slides at the end. All of your contributions will be part of that for other people who weren't able to join us today. So as we go through the next half an hour or so, before I want to leave some time for questions and informal conversation, here's my simple solution or my simple proposition to you today to think about. And really is about imagining. So we're in this situation together. We've understood a bit about why we tell stories and how that is connected to our schools. And what I've been reflecting on is in this time, how do we imagine or reimagine telling the story of our schools in ways that are simple, elegant, listening, and kind? And there are only 4 things because I figure that these are the kinds of things that we could unpack in much more detail if we had the time, and maybe you can connect with people that you know to play with these ideas. But I'm going to briefly take you through what I think some of these things are like. So let's just start with that idea of telling the stories are simple. And I'm going to go back to Ernest Hemingway, the writer, and he famously talked about, he was actually challenged to write a 6-word story. And we don't often think about stories that are so short. Normally a story is a novel or maybe a short story, which is 1,000 words, but a 6-word story. And he accepted the challenge and he told his story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. And one of the things I love about this story is that it connects you and engages you and maybe makes you wonder, and you might find yourself already filling the gaps thinking, why weren't they ever worn? What happened to that baby? Who anticipated it? And so one of the things that we're thinking about very often in these moments is how can we simplify the story of our schools in ways that really do get to the essence of what it is that we're trying to do for our own children. So I'm going to give you the idea. I don't expect anyone to be away here today, and yet there may be someone out there with a great 6 words, but I encourage you just to spend a couple of moments going back to your phones and thinking, if you had to sum up a story, either in a particular moment in your school that you're proud of, or the overall story of your school in 6 words, can you think of those 6 words and maybe publish them for everybody else to enjoy this afternoon? So this person here is great. All are welcome, dedicated teachers abound. Pandemic lockdown, virtual classroom, a brilliant expression of where we are right now. Innovative and inventive children of the future. Solidarity about the orange gatekeeper. I love that one, even though I don't, that makes me curious to want to know more. Resilience, connected, virtual is real. Happy children, happy adults. Got it down to 4 words, not even 6. Learning made fun with student teacher. School life online, learning fun teachers. This is a great exercise to do with people in your schools, just to start that conversation, as we make it so complicated very often for people. If we have to really narrow it down, what is at the essence that expresses who we are? Learning to be a good human. What a great expression of what it is that we're trying to do for our kids. Pandemic lockdown, but learning never stops. These are great, and some great examples, and keep adding them, keep thinking about them. This is what you've managed to do in a minute or 2. And yet imagine what you can do collaboratively with your teams as you think about what is at the heart of that story that we're trying to tell. It's okay to make mistakes. It's perfect. So here's, for the sake of argument, this is the 6-word story of our school that we've been using for some time at the International School of Brussels. Everyone included, everyone challenged, everyone successful. And that 6-word story, in fact, is our mission as well. And so when we talk about our story, we're also talking about the mission of the school. And this mission allows us to frame and reframe every decision that we make. Often we go back to this mission and we think to ourselves, is this decision that I'm about to make going to ensure that everyone is included, challenged, and successful? And to what extent are we moving maybe towards challenging everyone, but not necessarily including them. And these three things, these aspects of the story, work together to give us some kind of North Star or guiding compass towards where it is that we want to go. And we know that the story is really more complicated than that, because I could just say to you, well, how is everyone included? Does it mean that everyone arrives at the school free of charge? No. But it gives us an opportunity to open up and delve into that story in ways that then become more engaging. And when we entered this period of COVID-19, and on March 9th, we took the opportunity we made the decision to close our school. We decided that we would actually produce another short story. I have to confess, it's 7 words and not 6, but we gave ourselves the benefit of that extra word. And this was our story. Our campus is closed, our learning continues. And one of the things that we've learned about this storytelling and the simplicity, is that in times of crisis, these short stories are essential for your messaging. And what we've done is we've repeated this time and time again. Our campus is closed, our learning continues. This has become a mantra for us that has become the basis for school communications, the basis for what we put on our website, the basis for the way in which we make decisions, the basis for which we develop plans for the next few weeks. One of the things I know from a communications point of view is that when things get tough, the message has to get simpler, and the message has to be seen in very powerful ways. And so this is one example of how we try to simplify that message. So that's something about simplicity. Let's move to this word elegant. I've always thought that the word elegant is an elegant word. But let's unpack what I think that means. For me, elegance when it comes to storytelling is this: that every word is chosen with care. Every word tries to reveal or create something. Every word connects. Every story is intentionally designed. I'm sure that most of you have worked in schools as long as I have, and you know that schools are factories of information and publications and emails and communications around the school gate, and we have words coming everywhere all the time at us. And one of the things that I believe, particularly in moments of crisis, is that we have to go back to that idea of the stories that we write are like poetry. We have to choose the words we use carefully. It has to be this principle of less is almost always more. And we choose the word, in a sense, ascribing an honor to them that they deserve. Not simply rushing to the cliches, but actually trying to dig deep and find the words that resonate with people and make them feel connected and create an experience for people that guides them through that. And I'm going to give you another example of what that might mean in practice. So this is a quick little exercise. It's actually a photograph from before the COVID-19 days of 3 or 4 students in our middle school. And I'm simply going to ask you the question, what do you see? And now, if you go to your phones and you remember that, take a look and just think, what are the words that you would describe the photo that you just saw? So maybe the class was over, there's some collaboration, people are interacting, ideating, kids are happy, playful, downtime. So what I immediately see from your first responses is that there's a kind of difference of opinion. On the one hand, it feels like it's maybe free time, it's quite a lot of, they're quite relaxed, they're having fun, and it's maybe quite calm. And on the other side, I'm seeing words like collaboration or interacting or sharing ideas. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is this idea of when parents particularly see learning, they don't necessarily see what we see. They see something different. And we assume that they see the story of learning because we see it every day. I've always said, you know, for me, when a family walks around the school and puts their head into a grade 4 classroom, what do they see? They see desks, a teacher, maybe some computers and books and pencils and students. But do they see learning? They probably think, oh, the only frame of reference is what it used to be like when I was in grade 4. And it's not like that. And so what my belief is that families really struggle because we don't give them the words to see what we want them to see. And this, in fact, is called framing theory. It's this idea that if you say something, people will see that thing. And this is exactly it. And some of you saw it and you immediately put that word down. But if I now say to you collaboration, that learning is about collaboration, and we believe that learning happens in this collaborative environment, then that's what you will see. And you won't see recess, and you won't see over-relaxed children lying on furniture somewhere outside of their club. You will see what we've suggested. And so as we tell the story of our schools, one of the things we have to do is determine elegantly what are the words that we are going to use to describe that learning. So have a look at this picture again. This, for us, is collaborative learning. And yet we know that unless we frame it for people, particularly families from some parts of the world and not others, they will see something very different. They will see something that looks anathema to them. They will see something that is nothing like the experience of school they had. And so we see the power of words and storytelling in actually creating that pattern over the chaos. Without the pattern, without the story, this is just a chaotic scene of kids doing who knows what. So then the question is, what are the words that we need to choose? So we've decided in our school that in fact, there's only about 5 or 6 words that we want to focus on when we meet with families. We want to describe learning in ways that they can remember 5 or 6 words as they walk around the school. And these words may not be the words that you would use, but I think it's interesting to think, what are those words? And our idea now is, rather than giving people lots and lots of operating manuals and curriculum documents, to say to them, look, learning in our school is about collaboration. It's about working in groups, in teams. It's about feedback. It's about flexible spaces. It's about autonomy, having that ability to go off and personalize the learning. It's about setting goals and knowing when you've reached those goals. And it's about having a passion for what you do and finding your passion, if that's not on the standard curricula. And what happens is, as we talk about this more clearly, funnily enough, parents see it more clearly than when they're walking around the school. And I'm a big believer of simplicity, elegance, and finding the words that, as I said before, create rather than confuse. And here's another idea associated with elegance. And it's a very simple question, and it's really relevant in these times of crisis. Because in times of crisis, what happens is everybody runs around saying it's a crisis. And it's like everyone tries to paint a picture, and everyone's got a paintbrush, and they're all throwing dobs of paint onto that canvas. And then you end up with a chaotic picture. So one of the things to think about are, in these moments, who are the storytellers in your school? Is it really clear who those people are that are finding these words, are creating these stories or these slogans? Or maybe it's not so clear yet. So I'm going to just as a quick poll, different kind of question. So if you think about who has a paintbrush in your school? Who are the ones who really are empowered to be the storytellers? Maybe you want to say, go up, slide up on your slider there. We're really clear on this. We're going down, we're not entirely clear yet, and maybe there's some work to do to think about who are those storytellers. Common I'd see is a comment that these blobs could be very well projections of truth. I absolutely believe it, that in some ways that there's a kind of collective knowledge within a school, and what we're doing all the time in communications is balancing, that collective sense of where truth may lie, with another rationale here, which is to really find that sense of how is the school being led? Who is determining what words, what pictures are setting the future of aspirations and vision of the school? So we're seeing that we're doing pretty well here. You're definitely on the side of clarity, but maybe there's some way to go in terms of understanding the answer to that question. And one of the things that we've tried to do in this time is certainly provide windows into the learning of students in ways that are funneling everything into one page on our website. And again, what we've noticed is in times of crisis, you need to give people a much more simplified on a website navigation, so that on one single page you can get all these glimpses of what learning looks like as you enter a distance learning scenario. So you can go to our website and check out this page, and this page shows you loads of different examples of what the distance learning program looks like. And this all is funneled through our communications team. So we're going to go to the third idea here. For me, storytelling, particularly in moments of crisis, is about that simplicity, it's about that elegance, and maybe quite surprisingly, it's about listening. And one of the things I've always believed about storytellers, great storytellers, is that it's about listening first and speaking later. Great storytellers have spent years sometimes listening, observing, watching, taking feedback, until finally the story comes out. I think this is where we get somehow that balance between the storyteller from our last question who's holding the paintbrush, but that storyteller themselves has to be someone who has spent a long time listening to the ideas, the thoughts, the expressions of what learning is from colleagues, from parents, from students. And I'm really interested in this idea of how storytelling within schools actually begins with this listening mode. And you can see that expressed on our website. And this is an idea, again, that we've been playing with for a while. You remember the website that at the very beginning I showed you that was full of words and it looked like a dictionary being splattered onto the page. Our decision was to take this listening idea and to say, rather than give you lots of text on our website, we're simply going to ask you one, rather than presume what it is that we think you want to know, we're going to ask you what you're looking for today. And we're going to use a really powerful search function to deliver that information as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And not only this is a website that listens and learns. So as you put more information into this search bar, we're learning about the kind of information that you and other parents really want from us. And so this interactive tool is enabling us to literally listen and not just assume what it is that parents. I see on the question that a question around AI driven, and that's a great point. And this isn't actually. So one of the things we do is we manually look at every search that's gone in at the end of every week, and that gives us the opportunity to have discussions about, okay, does this mean that maybe for the next few weeks, people are not finding this, or maybe there's a new search term that's come up that makes us think about how we need to adapt the website. And so for us, that's really important, to think about how parents are using this and to provide a tool that is really relevant to them. And here's another example of how we believe that in some ways we're exploring listening. This is not your usual admissions office. This is an admissions office that we created about 3 years ago. Our school is in the center of a forest, and in the center of the school is a 18th century chateau. And in one room in that chateau, we've got this kind of glass cube, and this glass cube is what we call the ISB experience room. And we developed this because we really wanted to change the way in which people do admissions. So no longer just say, we're giving you lots of information. We wanted to invite families in to have an experience and to tell us what was important to them. And to learn, we wanted it to be a learning experience. And so one of the things you're seeing here in this photo is a family that is playing an interactive game. And this interactive game is really helping them decide what's important for them when choosing a school. And when there's 4 or 5 members of the family, including the kids, they're playing this game. And in this way, you'll see that my admissions colleague on the left there, Robin, he's not at the center of this. He's sitting back a little bit to one side, and he's put them at the center so that he's actually enabling them to have an experience where they might learn. And this is what we know good teaching is about. It's about facilitating experience. And for us, as we tell the story of our school to prospective families, we've found that this kind of technique has worked really well. So let's think about listening. And listening also assumes that we kind of sometimes know what it is that parents are asking when choosing a school. So what I'm going to ask you is to go back to your phones for a minute and just to put some ideas. What a question that, or something that's important for a family when choosing a school. Let's take some of the knowledge that's in the room today. So we already see some of the things that actually, I've asked this question all over the world, and it's so interesting the way we get some very similar answers around the facilities. Tell me about your facilities. What about, how does your school compare with other schools? What about the level of safety and security, the quality of the teachers? What are your values? Fees, extracurricular activities. It's as if you've actually spent the last 3 years working at ISB, because it's the same questions over and over again. And we've actually, in our experience room, we've narrowed this down to 20 different tiles, and they choose one of these tiles. One of the things that's really interesting to me as we listen to parents, and clearly from the answers that are coming out here, that you have that knowledge and expertise about what it is that parents are looking for. And what we've found is that if we narrow this down to our top 5 questions that even I as a parent will be asking will be, will my child be happy? Will they be safe? Will they make friends? Will they grow in understanding and knowledge? And will they transfer on to the next stage in their learning journey? And the question that I'm kind of asking today, or suggesting, is that we think about is, as we think about those 5 questions, think about how as we tell the story, are we answering those questions? Are we showing that we've listened to what we know parents want? Or if we look at our curriculum brochures or our prospectus or our website, are these questions that we're really communicating and telling the story about? And I'm also thinking that as we move forward in this, this top 5 might change. So if you go back to your phones again, and I'm very curious to see what you think. Here you can actually select who will be the first, second, what will be the most important, all the way to the 5th most important of these. Can we rank these questions? And maybe particularly in the time of COVID-19, has that ranking changed? And as you do that, I'm going to answer a question that I see on the blog. Can these expectations differ with the demographics? Absolutely, yes. So we now have 3 years of data as we worked in the experience room, and where we can show that different people from different cultural settings actually choose different things. And so we know that a Japanese family is typically more likely to go for one set of things as opposed to a US family. The other thing we've also done is a lot of neuroscience research to link these choices to ways in which people think, to thinking styles. So we can actually begin to identify the thinking style of a person by the things that seem to be important to them. So as I predicted, even as we answer these questions, it's really interesting to me that this question of will my child be safe is suddenly shooting to the #1 position. And I guarantee that would not necessarily have been the #1 for every school all of the time. And I think that this is something that we need to think about as we tell the story of our schools. As we move forward, I think we're entering an era where this first question is going to be more important than it's ever been. And how do we re-narrate the story of our school to really think about the way in which these questions should be answered? Let's look to the last one, because I want to leave about 10 minutes for questions if there are any. And I want to talk finally about this idea of kind. It's an idea that I think I've had for a couple of years now, where I've been thinking about, first of all, admissions as an opportunity to demonstrate institutional kindness. Let me explain what that might mean. The French social activist and philosopher Simone Weil talked about kindness as a form of human attention. And so this is something that I really like. Maybe my best definition of being kind is actually to give them your attention. And a lot of what we've been talking about today as we tell the story of our school and think about that is that the kindness of the storyteller is not necessarily to tell the story that he or she wants to tell, but maybe it's to give someone the attention to respond to what it is they want to hear, to understand and take a moment, as we've talked about, to listen to their questions and what's troubling them, what their concerns are. And also maybe to invite them to share their story. And I think underneath here, as educators, one of the things that I'm also challenged about is that we feel compelled in so much of our communication to reduce the story of learning to test results and college offers and the number of courses we offer and who's on our honor roll, maybe famous alumni that we have, the number of awards or competition medals that our kids win. And I'm wondering whether something in this moment of crisis is pushing us towards this idea that the stories that we should be telling, particularly at this moment, are more expressions of human kindness. And I don't know what all those are, but I'm going to give you one example. 2 examples, in fact. So we actually created, and you'll see it as you go to our website, a little Padlet. A Padlet is an electronic bulletin board where people can just post expressions of something. In this case, we asked them to say, if you found that you've experienced a moment of kindness during this time, post it here. They're like electronic post-it notes. And what we found is sometimes the storyteller's role is to stop talking, to listen, and to give a space for other people to tell the story of the school. And as you look at this, just from a first insight, what you'll see is that these become expressions of what the school really is. And if we had said these things, it would kind of feel inauthentic. But the fact that we simply, as a storyteller, allow other people to tell the story of the school and focus it on these things of this aspect of kindness, it feels like it gives a moment where the real story is coming in. To give you another example, if you go back to our experience room, the other side of that big interactive screen, we have a very low-tech solution. What we do is we say to families when they come to visit us that very often what we're obsessed by is what we give them to take away, that brochure, that form, that leaflet. And we say, no, we're not giving you anything to take away. You've taken a moment to be with us. And we'd like to remember that you have left a trace of yourselves with us. And we feel we owe it to that family. And so what we do is we ask every child, every parent, to write a little note on a post-it note, leave a word, a thought, a diagram, a little drawing in their language or in English. And this has become a collage of hundreds of post-it notes where the story of the school as experienced by these prospective families is there for everybody to see, including every other prospective family. So these are the ways we tell the story of the school. What we're learning in the end is that it's actually not about so much about us filling the space, but creating spaces for other people to tell their story. So as we end today, and here we are towards the end of our hour, there's one last question, and I really want to thank everyone for being so participatory. Maybe this was the first time that you used menti.com, but just one thing that maybe you're taking away, if there was one lesson or thought or idea that has kind of connected with you and you want to say, yeah, I'm going to take that away, I'm going to think about that, talk with my colleagues, write it down here. Again, this will be a record for everybody else to see what it is that we're learning together as we navigate our way through this period of time. A couple of you took this the six-word story seems to have resonated. This idea of what we say is what we will see, keeping it simple. I love this thought that someone's had about facing the current challenges in an innovative way and not fearing. And I think that's interesting. I run a team of people, and we're doing this work all the time in our school. And I think it's because we are slightly fearful and disrupted and unsettled that it gives us an opportunity to think, oh, maybe there's a way of doing things that are a bit different. It gives us the confidence to try something. But I think that fear and innovation, they're all so closely connected. So lots of stories about the power of the simple message. So thank you for this today. I'm going to move on to the last slide and say I write a blog every week. I think it's my therapy, but it's something that people tend to read, called fragments2.com. It talks about a lot of these themes and many others, and it's a kind of personal journey that I'm happy if you take a look at that and share that. If you want to reach out to me, I would be more than happy to answer your email. And as I say, today it's just been a pleasure. I've shared some of my experience from this small corner of Brussels in Belgium, and I hope that this has helped you in your own journeys. So stay safe, and maybe there's a chance for a couple of minutes of questions. I'm going to have a look at the group chat. That's a really interesting question. Cyrus is asking, when parents don't want to know what to look for, how can authentic schools differentiate themselves from the plagiarists? You know, I tell you, there's something I've all done in the last 15 years in working in my school. And this may not be the right thing for you, but I've never been interested in what other schools do. In the sense that I'm not worried about plagiarists. If I've had people take ideas, take the designs from our website, I don't mind if people take those ideas. My job is to make sure that my school story is strong, authentic. And when people say to me, what is the difference between your school and someone else's school? I will always say, that's not for me to answer that question. My job is to make sure that you see my school in a true, authentic way. And it's for you to make up your mind. And that really has been something I've taken for a while now. I'm just looking through to see if I've missed any questions that came up through here. Pradipta, do you have any other questions that?
No, I don't see anywhere over here. Translation.
I think everybody's spellbound. It was
okay, David, I would now like to request our CEO Surabhi to give the closing note, please.
Good evening. This has been ABEA's 12th Masterclass and therefore our 12th week of setting a context for reflection. David, what a magical storyteller you are, David. And perhaps this is because you have an 18th century chateau in your backyard. Thank you so much for reminding us to revisit our value proposition. Such a pertinent question, not just for school leaders, but also teachers. It's time to open that Pandora's box. We need to start addressing this question urgently. And I think we all discovered how easy it is to write a 600-word essay, but just how tricky to express who we are in 6 words. David, your session was simple, every word elegant, and no wonder not one single person could stop listening. Just yesterday, I was listening to Mr. Barack Obama, where he said that if there were 2 things that he could teach his girls, it would be to be useful and be kind. So yes, David, thank you for reminding us to be kind. Not sure how many of us have used this before, but may I just add that menti.com is just about as cool as David. So thank you for that tool. Thank you, participants, for taking the time out and connecting us. And until we meet again, stay safe and stay. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.